Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs was Disney's first animated feature, but not just that. The 1937 film was also the first theatrically released animated feature in history. People tend to overlook just how groundbreaking that is. If you adjust for inflation, it also grossed more money than Frozen. But now that Disney's got 56 animated features under its belt, not counting Pixar, it's easy to watch Snow White and think it's a little bland or basic compared to what we've seen since. But we shouldn't forget just how much innovation Snow White represented, both for Disney and for animation. With this movie, Disney created an entirely new genre, as well as a blueprint for all of their other iconic features to come. Before we go on, be sure to hit subscribe and click the bell to get notifications on all of our new videos. To pull off a feature-length cartoon, Disney needed to create a brand new style that married the Disney spirit with a form that would appeal to a wide audience. During production, executives called Snow White Disney's folly. No one believed that anyone would pay to watch a feature-length cartoon in theaters. That seems ridiculous to us now in our world full of Disney franchises, theme parks, and merchandise, but none of that would exist without the leap of faith it took to make Snow White, and the new style of visual storytelling that came out of the movie. Cartoons of the time, including Disney's shorts, were known for their rubber hose aesthetic, meaning a very exaggerated type of motion, usually against a static background. We see this sensibility in the Seven Dwarfs. Their personalities are communicated very visually, and we see it also in scenes where the animals provide visual humor. But Walt Disney thought that this style couldn't keep an audience's attention going for a whole 90 minutes. So he set out to create a new kind of animation. And in order to create the illusion of depth, Disney pioneered a new multiplane camera technique. Rather than photographing one drawing, artists layered multiple sheets of drawings and moved the camera through them. Disney tested this technique in the Oscar-winning short The Old Mill, and they used it in Snow White to make the art more realistic and more broadly appealing. Aside from the dwarves and the animals, the characters in Snow White look a lot more human than anything Disney had produced up until this point. Artists brought in live models to sketch, another totally new concept in the animation world. On the downside, this increased realism came with less expressive facial features. Snow White herself has fairly indistinct, blurry features, presumably because Disney was trying to move away from the cartoony faces they were known for. But the effects of this style decision can be traced through almost every Disney film to date. Disney has gotten criticism for having very diverse male faces, but essentially one princess face. In Snow White, it's worth noting that the prince actually also has this inoffensive, pretty face. But the dwarves don't. They're expressive, with varying faces. And over time, the range of looks has increased for male Disney characters, but unfortunately for the female characters, beauty is still prioritized over expressiveness. Walt Disney shaped the future of animation forever when he decided to make his first film about a princess. When we think Disney now, we immediately think princess. But Snow White, the original Disney princess, has largely been forgotten about. Snow White is kind, gentle, and motherly. She sings, and animals flock to her. We see these traits in all three of the original princesses, Snow White, Cinderella, and Aurora. But the later two are more nuanced, interesting, and likable than Snow White. They have more personality, and that's because they benefited from what Disney learned from the Snow White experiment. Disney himself has commented that looking back, they weren't ready to develop a leading lady who could sustain our interest the length of a whole feature. Cinderella is basically Snow White 2.0, new and improved. Her personality is pretty much the same, but we get to spend more time with her. So we come to a clearer understanding of her motivations. We know Snow White's story because we're told about it, but we don't really see much of it. She doesn't interact with the evil queen at all until she eats the poison apple. And none of her relationships with the dwarves or the animals are ever made very specific.
Why, Grumpy, you do care.
When the huntsman can't bring himself to kill her because she's so pure and innocent, we mostly have to take his word for it because we haven't seen why she's so worthy of his mercy. We witness Cinderella as kind.
Like you too. She's nice, very nice. That's a better.
But Snow White's kindness is general and vague, so it comes off as a little shallow and boring. Disney didn't make Cinderella until 1950. That's 13 years after Snow White. And the third princess movie, Sleeping Beauty, was 9 years after that, 1959. Disney himself didn't really care about continuing to make princess movies. He was interested in pushing his creative limits. He considered his biggest visual achievement to be Pinocchio, and his passion project was the experimental and largely unsuccessful Fantasia. So Disney didn't make princess movies with any frequency until 1989, with the release of The Little Mermaid. The Little Mermaid marked the beginning of the Disney Renaissance. In this era, the Disney brand was cemented, and the princess story was cemented with it. The princesses from then on become even stronger, more specific, and well-developed. Ariel is curious and adventurous. Belle is intellectual and stubborn. And later, post-Disney Renaissance in 2009, Tiana is industrious and persevering. But everything that followed improved on the original princess model we got in Snow White. So everything we think of as quintessential Disney now is because the company made the choice to return to Snow White's style of storytelling, and that wasn't a given for many years. Disney movies also tend to be known for their romance between the princess and the handsome Prince Charming. This is a part of Snow White, but it's by no means the focus of the story. The prince's personality is far less developed even than Snow White's, and he gets way less time with our heroine than the dwarfs. He has very few lines, he doesn't even get a name.
I have but one song.
Snow White meets him at the very beginning of the movie, and doesn't mention him again until about an hour into the film. He's a plot device. The same can be said of Disney's next princess movie, Cinderella, where the prince is also nameless and used only to give Cinderella the just ending she deserves. But Disney has said, quote, they wanted to sell Snow White as a romance because it had a prince and a princess in it. I said, I believe in selling a thing for what it is. This has got dwarfs and a girl named Snow White in it, and the title is going to be Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. So that's the way it was billed, and that's the way it was sold. The romantic plot doesn't really become important until Sleeping Beauty in 1959. Starting with Aurora and Prince Philip, the romance becomes our focus, and the prince actually gets a personality, and this carried through in the Disney Renaissance. The most recent Disney movies, though, like Frozen and especially Zootopia and Moana, are taking a step back from romantic plots. What was originally something audiences desired is now seen as tired and cliched. People want to see independent heroines. It's interesting to consider that this mentality aligns with Walt Disney's original vision. He didn't see Snow White as a romance even when everyone else wanted to. Snow White also gave birth to the classic Disney villain. The evil queen is Snow White's stepmother, and this idea of the evil stepmother is a huge part of the Disney myth. Funnily enough, though, there's actually not an evil stepmother in very many Disney movies. Cinderella has one, and so does Rapunzel, arguably, in the much later Tangled, but that's pretty much it. The only other Disney movie that has an evil stepmother is Enchanted, which is a self-aware parody of Disney conventions. So this aspect of Snow White has managed to become thought of as Disney convention, and it's had a lasting effect on pop culture, even though it wasn't actually repeated in most future Disney. But that said, even if most classic Disney villains aren't step-parents, they do incorporate key aspects of the evil queen. She's jealous and vain, obsessed with her own beauty. And although she's supposed to be the fairest in the land besides our princess, she's pretty severe looking. Not to mention, most of her screen time is spent disguised as a hideous old woman. The uncanny combo of glamour and ugliness can be seen in many Disney villains. They tend to possess a heightened, drag queen-esque femininity, and facial features that might be objectively pretty but are considered a little unsettling because they're so exaggerated. As a result, the villain's beauty serves as a foil for the innocent beauty of the heroine. Of course, the evil queen isn't the visual opposite of Snow White, the way a hulking male ogre might be. But her vanity and artificial glamour emphasize Snow White's natural, effortless beauty. The curated look makes us subconsciously aware that she's covering up the evil inside her, and that concealed evil is scarier than an ugly monster, which is why the archetype is so successful. The lovable sidekick is the secret sauce to every Disney movie, probably every animated movie. And this trend was also started by Snow White, whose sidekicks are arguably more successful than the film itself. However little attention Snow White as a princess might get, everyone still loves the Seven Dwarfs. They represent Disney's roots, the Mickey Mouse sensibility of very visual, wacky, over-the-top characters. And that spirit that comes from Disney's very first cartoons shows in the sidekicks of almost every Disney movie that followed. No matter how painterly and beautiful the movies would become, there's always a sidekick to remind us that all of this started with a fun and very personable mouse. And of course, Disney's known for their musical numbers, a tradition that started with Snow White. Hi-ho,
Hi-ho, it's home from work we go.
Whistle While You Work,
Whistle while you work.
and Someday My Prince Will Come,
Someday my prince will come.
all became standards of the time. Snow White introduced the idea that a song from an animated movie could be a hit, paving the way for global phenomenons like Frozen's Let It Go.
Let it go, let it go.
But Snow White actually has a lot more songs than we tend to remember. A lot of people might be able to name every song in Beauty and the Beast or Little Mermaid, but most of Snow White's songs have been forgotten. A number are sung in that very stylized 1930s soprano voice. So they haven't aged well given our current pop sensibilities. But even at the time of release, those 3 songs, Hi-Ho, Whistle While You Work, and Someday My Prince Will Come, stood apart from the rest. So clearly, after Snow White, Disney realized that they could make every song in the movie stand alone.
In a most delightful way.
They learned from the 3 hits of Snow White that there are 2 key reasons why Disney songs last. In the case of Hi-Ho or Whistle While You Work, the appeal came from the catchy hook, and this led to favorites like
Hakuna Matata.
Be our guest, be our guest, be our guest.
Mr. I'll make a man out of you.
Meanwhile, Someday My Prince Will Come is a heartfelt expression of Snow White's desire. So if the song doesn't rely on a memorable hook, it can get its power by relating to something central about the conflict or the character's inner world. This is why the I Want song has become such a staple in many Disney movies.
I want to be where the people are. And will my reflection show who I am inside?
In later movies, almost all of the songs fit into one of these 2 categories, which explains why they remain so hummable decades later. All in all, Snow White doesn't have the most original plot or the most interesting characters. Few people probably rank it as their favorite Disney movie. But without Snow White, we wouldn't have our other Disney favorites. And the world of animation might be entirely different. So Snow White changed the course of film history in a very real and tangible way. And its fingerprints can be seen on every Disney movie since.
I didn't know what I had or what would happen or anything. We had the family fortune. We had everything wrapped up in Snow White.
It's Deborah.
And Susanna, and you're watching Screen Prism.
Thank you guys so much for watching.
If you like this video, please subscribe for more insights about all of your favorite movies and shows.
Down here.